speranza tro breve ti viene se non fa e tro ben mareso ne te fui pas tu Sirisio.
And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters 2020. I'm Jason Tramm. I'm your host, and thank you so much for joining us for Music Matters 2020, our new and unique podcast community. We are YouTube's fastest growing classical music podcast thanks to you. Thank you for joining us tonight, where we discuss the issues and the challenges we face as artists in 2020 as seen through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. Tonight we have a wonderful guest, Mr. Jason Duika, as wonderful as you just heard, a wonderful rising Verdi baritone who's got a very promising career, and we're delighted that he's here with us tonight. Welcome, and thank you so much. Welcome, Jason Duika.
Hello, so very happy to be here.
We're glad that you can spend some time with us. You are in the Midwest, right? Where are you calling from tonight?
I'm so sorry. I'm having horrible feedback now. Everything's being fed back to me, and I can't hear anything. I don't know what's going on.
Who's got a very promising career. Let's get our tech stuff lined up. And we're back. Thank you so much for joining us, Music Matters 2020. And I'm here with a very, very talented rising star baritone, Jason Duika. Jason, welcome.
Hello, Maestro Tramm.
It's always a pleasure. We got to work together a few times, and I was very impressed by your hard work and your dedication to your craft. So tell us about your background and how you got into singing and where you started making music.
Well, I started singing, as a 3-year-old can, just when I was a very little boy. And eventually, as I got older, I decided that voice lessons were in order to pursue singing. But opera was never my initial go-to. I loved pop and I loved jazz. Opera we often say opera chooses the person, and I really do feel that to be very true. It was in college, and I was a sophomore, and a teacher of mine suggested that I check out the scores and some CDs, check them out. Back then, CDs were still a big thing, before the digital age as much as it is now, at a little college here in Michigan, Alma College, and I ended up checking out a CD of Rigoletto with Cheryl Milnes, and I just remember listening. I couldn't read music at that point. I didn't understand. Technique for me was breathing and singing. That was the extent of my technical ability. So technique was a long way away. I was very green, as the kids say. But I loved listening to him and was so inspired by that warm, rich, big Verdian sound. And I remember thinking to myself, I hope I can do that someday, but I had no idea how. And so for me, it sort of began because I'm a mimic. I do a lot of voices. I imitated the singers that I heard in order to start trying to find my own voice.
Did you do a lot of musical theater as a high school student?
I didn't actually. I did choir, and then I did choir at Alma College. And at Alma, I had my first role with that experience of listening to Cheryl as Rigoletto. As Ruddigore, I was Despard Murgatroyd, the villain Gilbert and first role. school here in Michigan. It's like kids, and they have a really great choral program, but not necessarily opera. I was the only, opera singer, and that really cemented my love for performing, and I just buried myself in the role of the villain, and I think a lifelong love affair was born.
That's a good to get used to those villain roles at a young age, because they're a big one for baritones, right?
Yes.
So you finish up your undergraduate at the small liberal arts school, and you surround yourself with this. You do your first stage production. What was it like to do your first stage production?
Oh, I was so petrified. I was so scared. And I had no idea really what to expect. There was so much involved in the preparation, in the rehearsals, and in, of course, the memorization. And I said jokingly to a dear friend of mine now at Alma, the head of the voice department. He may be watching tonight, I don't know. His name is Will Nichols, and he was one of my first and still is biggest supporters. And he cast me as Despard Murgatroyd, but walking up to the front of Dunning Memorial Chapel to sing for the first time in my first official ever big audition, I remember saying to him, when I am done with this, please take me out to a field and shoot me. Because I was so, I remember to this day just how nervous I was. And I finished, and he laughed and he smiled and he said, "Jason, you did a great job." And then I ended up getting the role. But before opening night, I was one of the leading sopranos older than me, singing one of the female roles. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. She came up to me and she said, "Jason, you look a little peaked. It's not the Met yet, honey. You're going to be fine, And so I had to sort of endure some of that, which for a Touretteer is harder because everything's heightened. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, that's a major obstacle. I mean, so let's talk about that. Let's dig into this. So tell us about your struggle with Tourette syndrome.
Well, at age 5.5, my foot would turn in when I would walk, and it was really sort of unusual. I don't remember if it was left. And to see a neurologist, and they did diagnose me just shy of 6 with Tourette's. And little did I know what lay ahead in terms of the torture, self-torture. At its height, when I was in my early teens, I would have sometimes over 1,000 ticks a day. Boy. And nobody really appreciates how many muscles you have between your nose and your upper shoulder when you do that 700 times in a day. I would collapse in bed, completely exhausted and unable to speak because, everything's connected here. Ticks that I had, and I had, including swearing uncontrollably, which I've loved. Probably from 11 through 17 were the absolute hellish most years, something I wouldn't wish on anyone. I was ostracized daily, and I was even in one extreme instance beaten up. And I distinctly remember at one point being on the back of the bus and being held down by the bigger kids while they took turns spitting on me. That was one of those things you just can't forget.
Truly humanity at its worst.
I say I wouldn't. I call it my first life because it really was my first life. It was a life of, sometimes unendurable self-torture. And, Tourette is very misunderstood. So my mom had a T-shirt made because, I remember on one flight to Florida, which is only a couple of hours. I live in Michigan and near an hour from Detroit. We counted over 700 to 800 ticks in that one flight. You're twitching, you're ticking, you're gasping, you're moving, it's so it's so hard to endure. But I had a spirit of perseverance through it all, and I largely credit that to my family, to my parents, and there was so much given to me in terms of love and patience, and but it was very, very hard. The kids were not. They were unforgiving and unrelenting, and they did make it sport for me sport for me to be teased. And I remember in one instance, one of the more popular girls agreed to go to the dance with me and then never showed up or came with someone else, something like that. So when you have to endure something like that, it helps to think maybe you had it for some purpose. I continually say, because I'm a professional motivational speaker as well, and I've been blessed to speak to high school students, and I often talk of my struggle with TS. And Tourette's was my greatest teacher, as well as something that taught me a great deal of humility. And so I really was very blessed to have that mindset, and I credit that to my family.
Jason, so such an incredible story. How did you get control over such a challenging set of physical circumstances? How did you learn to control that?
Well, there are several aspects to that answer. The first is my case was profoundly intense. We went to the Mayo Clinic. We went to Henry Ford here in Michigan, Henry Ford Hospital, and there are Henry Fords all over the place in the Midwest. It's really good. And we saw all the big neurologists. They wanted to dope me up with Orapin and Afrinil, and those drugs made the Tourette's worse. So my mother, she and my father spent a lot of time researching what options existed, and homeopathy it wasn't quite as mainstream as it might be. It's still not totally mainstream, but it's more acceptable today. So we ended up doing a combination of diet, exercise, and anything I touched, breathed, or smelled could set me off. If I have an allergy, even to this day, I have very severe allergies to what I smell. I can't be around perfumes or colognes. I have, of course, most of us have some form, because of global warming, some form of environmental allergies. I do. And then, there was very serious Dursban it hadn't been banned yet. It was a pesticide everybody used, and it was very dangerous nowadays. People know better, but back then it was, when I was a little boy, it was still unknown. And one of probably the most difficult tick that I ever had was when I would snap my own neck back like this, and I called it the Whiplash Tick. And the problem with the Whiplash Tick is that you can snap your own neck. So I had to go, and at one point in a piano lesson, I remember distinctly being 12 years old, and my mom and Mrs. McCullum, my sweet piano teacher, had to hold me down on the ground so that I wouldn't, because I had a Whiplash Tick seizure. They kept coming and coming. So I had to endure some pretty horrific things. I'll be honest with you.
So it must have been a gradual process, learning how to negotiate this set of challenges.
We had to go, and we went to I think it was Henry Ford, and they put a giant needle. It was enormous. In my spine, it was my life excruciating to try to, I think, inject with some. I might not say this right. It was something that would numb this area and calm down the Whiplash Tick, which was, so severe, and for a time. What I personally believe is that my case burned so hot, it burned itself out. And it wasn't until I was 17 that year that the Tourette's started to subside, started to very, not so gradually, not overnight, but over 6 months. It went from all the time to very rarely. And it wasn't at first I thought, this is so amazing. And secondly, I felt like I had control of my own self, and I could start living in the 17th year of my life on the earth. I could start living for the first time. That's why I call it my first life. But I do believe, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. I do believe that the Creator saw me out of the corner of his eye and said, or her eye, and said, I'm going to help that Jason Duika.
Well, you have so much. You have so much fortitude, and I'm sure your parents as well. And that support system is so important. That now, when you look back and you're able to help other people, what's it like to talk to someone else, maybe who's younger and going through a similar set of physical circumstances?
Sometimes, especially with young Touretters, it's very hard for me to get through the conversation without crying. I can't believe I'm doing well right now. It's it was my great struggle. We all have one in our lives, and I'm grateful that it wasn't fatal, that it didn't, kill me young, but it was hell on earth for the duration of the first 15 years. Once I was diagnosed, of the first 20 some years of my life. The other odd thing is that once the Tourette's receded from the physical manifestation, all the thousands of tics, it entered my brain in a new way. And I had to contend with what I call goofy thoughts. And we all have them. You're driving down the road and you envision a train or a plane hitting you and killing everybody. It's like we all have them just for a split second. We coined a phrase when I was a boy called "the lid is off the id." And that's what Tourette's is. And so the id is that secret place we all have, lots of bad things are thought. It's a part of our minds, every one of us. And so I had to contend with, I liken it to like in a visual setting, watching a Harry Potter film and all those crazy, goblins or whatever, all floating around above you. Each one of those was a thought I had to endure, sometimes thousands a day. So the 20s, the first half of my 20s were about behavioral modification, getting my goofy thoughts under control. So the Tourette's, it takes no, and it certainly is. Had I not been a stronger person, which I believe most of us are just born with a certain amount of fortitude, a certain amount of unrelentlessness. Of course I was taught that, but I really think I was just very blessed to be born with a certain amount of fortitude, and I wouldn't yield. I wouldn't yield, and my mom wouldn't either. And I credit her big time with being such a champion, such a heroine to never really allow me to give up. And many times I did want to. I mean, anybody would.
So in your artistic journey, that fortitude is going to pay off very well in the opera field, which is such a challenging career path. So tell us about how you started your path to opera, controlling yourself, getting yourself ready to deal with the incredible stress of being an opera singer.
Well, I often say that I think this career, it just takes an awfully long time. To really get going. And that's one of the differences between it and so many other careers, that you can finish college, get a degree, go off and start working and have a family and a house and a car and all these things. Opera doesn't work that way for most of us. Most of us don't end up being 22 or 23 and singing that. That's just not how it is for most of us. It's a decades long journey, and it really is, in a lot of ways. It certainly can be attributed to being a war of attrition. And so once again, I was very fortunate to have people from the beginning. That Despard Murgatroyd experience. I was 20 years old. I actually wasn't. I was 19 just before, and I was 20. And the people at Alma College, Tony Patterson, Victoria Walker, my first voice teacher, and Will Nichols, the choir conductor there, they encouraged me to pursue it. And Dr. Scott Messing, who's retired, he was just a huge help in terms of helping me understand music theory. It was a real struggle. I had to take extra coachings and trainings with him to get through the tests and understand the intricacies of music theory and all that makes us professional musicians, because it really was years before I could read music well.
The good thing about good teachers is we spot good students, people who've got that ability, and someone who's getting we help. I'm a university professor. I look for students who have anything. If they want to learn, I will make it my life's work to make sure that I help them to achieve. Because to watch someone like you get up there and perform a role now, and to see that you had a part in that is a great victory for those people, I'm sure.
They were really supportive and kind, and they were also tough on me, and I knew they needed to be. Sometimes it felt like too much, but I understand now why. But I finished there and I went to Portland State in Portland, Oregon for my master's. I applied to the bigger places and I wasn't accepted. And because I was still struggling with the goofy thoughts, struggling with the what I call the fallout of Tourette's, it was very hard for me even to maintain. I had to work very hard at college to get a B or above average, like very, very hard. In high school, and I mean, every college student will tell you this, that, high school may be a cakewalk, they get straight A's. It wasn't for me either. I had to work hard in high school, but not compared to college. And, I had to work very hard to get the B pluses, and an A or A minus at college, especially in music theory and music history, was a big deal. So I had to struggle academically. I also had to struggle technically. Like I said initially, God, for me, technique was breathing and singing. Like I didn't know what technique was, So it was a long journey. 3/4 of the way state, I worked with a wonderful Verdi baritone named Richard Zeller, who is a dear friend still to this day. He's a very tone sung all over the place. And he was the first guy who had an understanding of what technique was and cover. And he's just a lovely guy. I've only had 2 teachers in my experience in my entire life. I'm going to be 38 this year. And the late 30s are magic time for Verdi baritones. So it's the last couple of years have been nothing short of extraordinary. I got to do my first Nabucco, my first Due Foscari, my first Enrico, my first Herod, and it's I get goosebumps thinking about I'd be able to. And
that voice settles right at that age. It settles, and you can sit on the technique, and it starts to open and get all that brilliance.
But the other woman I have to send a shout out to is my dear friend and sweetheart, Andrea del Giudice, whom I call Maestra la Voce, which is mistress of the voice. I know she's referred to as she's known by many names, the voice whisperer. I watched that episode. But she, from the beginning, she was just so in my corner, like fiercely supportive, fierce.
When did you start studying with Andrea?
4 years ago. And it was work, because I was already, my amazing manager, Peter Ransman, who's another just wonderful person and incredible supporter. I didn't know, like, okay, just backing up for just a second. I was studying with Richard, and I did my first Ford. This is 13 years ago. I did my first Ford, and Richard was Falstaff. And he said, "You're going to be a Verdi baritone." And I said, "I'm going to be a what?" I'd never heard the term before. Nowadays, these 20-year-old baritones are like, "Well, I'm actually a Verdi baritone." I'm like,
give it a few decades.
You might be. You might be, but you might not be, actually. You might be a tenor. Anyway, it's pretty funny what some of the young singers say. But Richard was the first one to tell me that was going to be the case. And I remember for Peter, 8 years later, I sang "Hai già vinto la causa" and "O vin dissipa la tristesse," a Hamlet's aria, for my audition for him. And Peter said, at the end of it, he said, "You're a Verdi baritone." And I was like, "Oh, really?" I was just overcome, because I had just finished a young artist program. They discouraged all of that. They didn't want me singing Verdi. They said, "You're going to be a lyric baritone. You're not a Verdi." And I was like, okay. And, it was a big company, and you want to play along, and you want to be saleable. You want to have a career. So it's like, do I want to be a Verdi baritone, and sing Verdi at D houses, or do I want to sing Mozart in A house? I'll take the Mozart in A house. But now Verdi is really my home rep, and it feels extraordinary to sing it every day. And it was my team. They're an amazing team. Nicolos Buelz is my principal operatic Italian diction coach and principal Italian coach. My principal coach is Kevin Bilsma, who's the head of Opera Toledo, and he lives here in the Midwest, and he's a dear friend of mine. And he's the one playing in my Porch Opera Act 3 tomorrow. And then Andrea is the teacher, and Peter is the business head. And it's an amazing team to have to bring it together. Richard was so important, because he gave me the skills to recognize, when I got with Peter and Andrea, just who I was actually working with. And those people are so important, to be able to recognize and say, this person really has the ears. This person really understands.
You're talking about some very talented, good friends on the other end. It's good people. All of them have been on the show. We've had Peter, we've had Andrea, just great artists and great people, and huge hearts as well.
Yes. They're fiercely loyal and supportive, and they give. I'm always, even still, and they're probably going to laugh when I send them a recording of something I'm working on. I'm always just petrified they're going to just rip it to shreds. But they rip it less and less now, and I understand that's the job. But I think one of the things that impressed me also is that they're humble people. They're nice. I didn't have at some of the universities and places I've matriculated. Some of the places I've been, I didn't have nice teacher experiences. They weren't kind, and kindness is so important to me. That's one of the biggest lessons I learned from Tourette's. And Richard was very kind, and Andrea and Peter and Nicolo and Kevin are all very kind. And, to be able to recognize who I was with and be able to have the opportunity to explore repertoire and sing. I tend to be more conservative than they are. Last July 4th, I was cast as Nabucco, and I contacted them and I said, are you sure? And they said, yes. And they were right. They came to closing weekend. They were unequivocally right, but it was a couple of weeks before I realized that they were. And I think that, it's such a testament to Andrea's intimate knowledge of the voice and the breath and the patience, the detail. For me, opera is very much like life, or my struggle with Tourette's is it forces you to teach you patience. It forces to teach you humility, which are practiced. They're learned behaviors, and they're really important to me now more than ever.
There's so much to delve into there. And what's it like attacking a role like Nabucco for the first time, or one of these large roles? What does it feel like emotionally, technically? What are the challenges that go into preparing for someone who might not know? What's the challenge of preparing one of these monstrously challenging roles?
Well, the thing with Nabucco, I'll go back to Due Foscari first, just real quick, because it led right into Nabucco. The previous February, a year ago, this past February, about almost 2 years coming up, I was hired to sing my first Verdi title role in I Due Foscari. And Due Foscari is slightly lower like Macbeth. Nabucco's higher like Rigoletto. So, Foscari's an 85-year-old man, and it was 2 hours in the makeup chair every night, and they had to gray my beard, and it was just absolutely nuts, that role. It very histrionically challenging in a different way, because I had to learn how to walk like an 85, And they hired me, and I was like, you do realize and I was 35, you do realize I'm 50 years younger than the guy I'm portraying. I'm a young, but you don't, the trick is you can't sound that way. You have to sound like heroic Verdi baritone. So it was really a testament to the technique that she had already taught me. But luckily, I was cast 6.5 months before that, so I had lots of time to prepare intimately. And I went to New York, and I prepared every note with Andrea, and I sang some of it for Peter, and blah blah blah. And it was so meaningful to do that, and that big Verdi baritone role, which is principally so difficult because the final scena is 14 minutes and there's 6 scenes to the role. And the final scena, Questa dunque l'iniqua mercede, which he comes in and sings, just brass, blazing. It's so glorious. And then he dies at the very end. He dies. And so when you get to that and you don't let the adrenaline, you've already sung all this. You can't overly warm up. The roles are so long, you'll leave it in the practice room. So just warm up enough to get the voice, and then use it, like coast on it for the whole role. All these little intricacies were made that much clearer by Andrea's detailed technique. And so in Nabucco, when I had much less time, I said, oh, well, I already sang Foscari. This is slightly higher, but not as long. It was still very long. It's still almost an hour. But I know I can do this. And so it was already set. My voice was already set. And Nabucco, I was able to get it healthily in my voice in 4.5 weeks.
That's a quick turnaround.
And then I went to New York and I sang it. Christina Major Davis, if you're watching, hello, dear. An amazing dramatic
shout out to one of my dear friends.
Amazing dramatic coloratura on Peter's and Andrea's. We're all in the same alphabet soup. The Ransman Artist Management. We all love to cook too, so we call them the Ransman Cookers too as well. We're going to go on tour and cook for everybody.
Be a good production. Everyone will be well fed.
Christina and I went together to New York. She from Texas, me from Michigan, and we had a triple coaching for Peter, Andrea, and Nicolo, and we sang through our entire roles. We did everything because Abigail and Nabucco sing a lot together. And we finished, and they were like, "You guys are ready. Go off and do it." And we had an amazing run, and they flew out for the final weekend, and it was just so special.
That was West Bay Opera in San Francisco.
West Bay Opera in San Francisco, where I previously did my first Marcello in Bohème 2 years ago this month, and then almost 2 years ago the Due Foscari in February of 2019, and then my last role before COVID hit. My last role last October was Nabucco. I was supposed to do Traviata this past May out there, but that's been moved till the future.
Well, we hope that'll come sooner rather than later, because that'd be a beautiful role for you. I met you. We were doing a couple productions, and Andrea said, "You have to hear this voice." And if you send her a recording, she's probably sent it to me as well. She's like, "Check this out. You got to hear this one," because she knows I'm always looking for people, really good, talented people to work with, and we work together a lot. So, tell us about
in that Traviata. You were wonderful.
It was a lot of fun.
Traviata.
Well, we'll do that again. We'll do that again with you in the larger role.
Oh, I'd love to sing Gemma.
Tell me about your activities in code. I know you've done some really interesting things.
Well, let's see. My mother came up with the idea, and she've actually trademarked it because we want to keep it in our planetary orbit. We call it porch opera. And we didn't know who was going to come. We planned one for June 26th, this past June, was just a couple days before my birthday. And amazingly, we have these 4 big post mailboxes that people take their keys to in our neighborhood here in Michigan. And amazingly, almost 50 people, we had like 48 or 49 came. I think it might have been a few more, actually. And initially, opera outside, who knew? But they loved it. And so we did an immediate follow-up one at the end of July, and almost 70 people came. And then I did a live stream that night, and there were almost 220. So it was born out of the fact that I had all these roles canceled. My first Elijah here in Michigan at Alma College, where Will Nichols has continually hired me back. I did my first Carmina there and my first Saul by Handel. And I've been bugging him to do the Elijah for a long time. And we finally scheduled it and had it all organized. I went there for rehearsals in February, and then just a couple weeks later, boom. So I don't know. Anybody wants me for an Elijah, I'm ready.
It's in the can, ready to go. It's good to know.
It's ready to go. So I was so excited to do that, because that, I feel, is a real dramatic baritone oratorio. It's like an opera. It's just so good. And then of course the Traviata were canceled. So I thought, well, this is a chance for me to perform in front of people for the first time. I had done some online stuff, but it's not the same. And we have a big yard, and people were social distancing. They were wearing masks, and we're all very safe. I'm not singing to anybody up close, but they loved it, and they really appreciated it. And it brought opera to people who may not have experienced it live before, and it just made me feel alive again, because that's where I know I belong. That's where my soul is just on fire, is up there. So it was just so meaningful. And my third one is tomorrow night.
Oh, congratulations. And what have you learned by doing these?
It's very awkward to sing outside for the first time. Big rep. When you go up for a high note, your voice just goes, and then it keeps going, and there's nothing to bounce back. Oddly enough, though, it frees everything up, because we rely too much on these indoors. We do, all of us. And it frees everything up, and I never sing better than I do now outside. I'm like, can we just do everything outside in the future, please?
We may have to, for at least the immediate future.
Yeah. Yes, very true.
So have you done a lot of the online things as well? You've done some online streaming concerts?
I did a couple early on. I did one of just arias, with my little speaker that I have, and it was nice, but nothing compared to this. So I am planning on doing another live streaming concert here at my house, probably in December. I love to do Christmas concerts, and Michigan is far too cold to sing outside in December. which is why we're doing the next Porch Opera concert, the last one tomorrow, because in October in Michigan, it usually rains, and at Halloween we can even get snow, and it's just too difficult. So it's really funny when you're singing a really lilting phrase and the birds join in. That's an interesting thing to get used to. And we have lots of wildlife here. We have turkeys who have whole families and their little turkeylets, I don't know what to call them, and then deer with all their fawns. They just walk through the yard and they kind of stare at you, and it's a really cool place to do it. I hope the animals enjoy it too.
Well, certainly, it must be so special to watch, to be, I know for me, I spent a whole summer doing all virtual projects with large virtual choirs and keeping my musical communities together. And the hardest thing has been missing my real live people in the same room. So it must have been so beautiful to have that first concert and to feel yourself up there delivering a phrase for real people in the same moment.
Their reactions are usually fairly extreme. I really feel that the way that because I don't know in our neighborhood who has heard opera for the first time. It's always an intriguing experience, even for an opera singer. And I really love what Rich Roberts he says, if opera, it affects people very severely, very significantly initially. They'll either, if they love it, they'll love it their whole lives. But if they hate it, they may learn to appreciate it, but it'll never become a part of their soul. And I really feel like that was just so perfectly written, because I think a lot of it is true. But I think still that just since I just do arias or scenes, because I had a friend who joined me for a concert last, it gives enough of an appreciation for them to know what they're experiencing, and not a 5-hour Wagner opera for the first time, which if you're not an opera goer, that might turn you off.
We had Mark on here, Mark Delavan, who was talking about preparing his first Wotan and Ring Cycle, and it's just like your first Nabucco, preparing those roles. It's like an Olympic event as you get into that career. You see where it takes you, and well, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you about these things. And what advice do you have for young singers coming up now in this time of COVID? What are you doing when you're not doing music these days?
Well, I love to write. I'm an amateur sci-fi writer. I'm a huge science fiction nerd, so I write a lot of sci-fi. I have different stories that I've written, very, very lengthy. I'm looking into how to publish them and whether or not that could be a thing. It's an involved process. I love to lift. I do a lot of lifting here at home. Our gyms have opened back up, but it's not truly safe just yet. So I ordered some dumbbells and I lift it. I lift at home. I really am an avid baker as well. I do a lot of baking. I love to share, with the family. Before COVID, I was just telling a friend this recently. I love to have a party, a dinner party, and make really great food for people. I think that's a great way to share fellowship. So.
And any other musical things you're working on now as you get ready as this COVID era continues? What are your next plans?
I have just finished learning most of Rigoletto, my first Rigoletto, and I actually have sung through the whole thing a couple of times, and it feels glorious. So I can't wait to sing that. That's the next big. I've also learned I learned most of Iago. That's one of the arias. I'm singing 2 scenas from that tomorrow night. I'm singing Iago's Credo and his drinking scena, the Beva con me, which I love.
The first time?
Yeah, it's the first. It's not the first time I'm performing them, but it's the first time I'm singing them in front of people.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Okay, how can people watch these concerts? Can they catch the stream or?
Tomorrow, because it's newer rep, I'm not doing a live stream. I'm not doing a live stream tomorrow. I did last time. But if my team and I decide that we like the recordings, I'm going to have my mother, she's my amazing videographer. She's fantastic. I'm going to have her record me singing the arias. If the team, that is aforementioned, approves, then it can go up on social media. But you have to be careful, especially in this FOC, when you're starting to get into it, not to share too many things too soon. I remember, and I'll just finish up real quick, the last weekend of Nabucco, Andrea and Peter came to our Saturday matinee, and at West Bay they do back-to-back shows. Ooh. So we had for closing weekend. So I had 14 hours apart an 8 p.m. Nabucco Saturday and a 2 p.m. on Sunday. So if you can do that, this was talking to myself. If I was telling myself, if you can do that when I was learning the role, you can sing anything. And I actually Sunday, because I was so perma-warm from the previous night, Sunday was slightly easier and actually better than Saturday night. So I credit that to Andrea's detailed teaching of the measure by measure work.
And it's the teaching, and it's the students' hard work, and your technical dedication, and your steadfast work and preparation. All those things are equally important, and they have to come together in that magical package we call opera. What a great story, Jason. Now, we worked together, and I was just so impressed with you as an artist without knowing a lot of your backstory. And to hear your what you're able to do and how you've achieved and how I think you're going to achieve when this opens up, I think that how can people find out more about you?
Well, they can go to my website, jasonduikabaritone.com, and all of my updated media is on there. I'm on Facebook. I do have an Instagram. It's Baritone Jason. I don't have a Twitter or a TikTok. I feel like that's redundant. I know it's all the rage right now. I may end up getting a TikTok. Everybody has
opera
a TikTok.
singers doing TikTok. I'm so old.
They are, and it's fabulous. I feel like I have enough to manage with 2 Instagrams, a Facebook, and a website. That's enough.
I have my children do some of that stuff. I mean, my daughters like to watch dance videos on TikTok, but I haven't seen that applied to classical music. But maybe it's a good idea.
If I get bored enough, which may end up happening, I will endeavor to find out, and I'll let you know.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jason, and continued success. We'll be watching for it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on Music Matters 2020. Please remember to, if you like this show, please subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. We have our next guest on Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that is Jake Landau, a wonderful new composer, a student of John Crigliano at the Juilliard School of Music, who's writing incredible music. You're not going to want to miss that. So thank you so much for joining us. And remember, check out all of our past episodes and our upcoming episodes. I just booked a whole mess of interviews and great guests for December and November, and you're not going to want to miss them. So thank you so much for joining us on Music Matters 2020. And remember, keep music alive. Good night.
Così fiera in seguito